Hello and welcome to A Celtic World, the YouTube channel and podcast that celebrates the fact that Celtic have a worldwide fan base. From Largs to Lisbon, Helmsdale to Hat-Yai, wherever you are watching from, you're part of this great big Celtic world. Let's say hello to two of our usual faces. David, who's in Vietnam. How's it going, David?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to the show.
And our David number two, recent addition to the team, who's in Bangkok.
Yep. Hi,
How's it
how are
going?
you?
Very good indeed. And joining us, our very special guest today is Pat from Glasgow, otherwise known to many of you, no doubt, on Twitter as Lisbon Lion. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, sir. Thank you. Can't complain with 7 wins out of 7 in the league, you know. Bit of a stumble in Europe, but, you know, these things are going to happen when you play in the big boys' playground.
Well, that's exactly what these big boys are going to be talking about today. So, well, let's have a look, shall we, and see what the menu is. We're going to be talking about the game, obviously. We'll go through some stills from the match, some of the incidents of note, let's say. Then we're going to talk about Lisbon Lion and your alter ego, if that's what it is, on Twitter. And we'll go through a bunch of tweets, talk about that. That'll be fun. And then we're going to have a bit of an emotional check-in, see where we are going into this international break. The highs and lows, how we feel about the team, how we feel about individual players, how we feel about the manager. Because as ever, among the Celtic fan base, there's the whole spectrum of emotions is there to be seen. So I wonder where we all are. I'm not so sure. So let's get into that. Hello to everyone who's in the chat. Thank you for joining us. About time too. There's Tam Max saying hail, hail. Henrik McLaurson. Time to get 3 Davids on. Well, okay. I think two's hard enough to manage. But anyway, let me just pop this on. Ticker. And we'll go through the game. So I'm just going to show these photos. First of all, just by way of saying hello to Pat, this is what it looks like on Lisbon Lion if you're a Twitter user. Just an ordinary man, nothing special, nothing grand, sharing historical images of Celtic. Love Celtic, hate no one. Copyright of all images resides with the owner. So, your musical tastes being revealed there a little bit, Pat?
I think so, yes. One of the greatest concerts that I ever attended was the week Celtic beat Barcelona in 2012. My son had bought me, my birthday's around that time of year, my son bought me tickets to see Christy Moore at the Barrowland, and it was the same week, a few days later, and the atmosphere at that concert, you know, was just something else. You know, Christy said at one point, yeah, you could change a string in a guitar, he said, and you wouldn't notice, he said, because the crowd just kept on singing the song, you know. Tremendous concert, tremendous week, and always admired his music. And if you have a look on BBC Sounds, you'll find him on Desert Island Disc. Very interesting as well about his life, his troubles with alcohol, his politics as well, and how that fed into his music. I always found him a fascinating guy. Alas, well into his 70s now, you know, none of us can stop old Father Time, but he's still performing and still performing to a very high level. Saw him playing at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall, and it's fair to say that the atmosphere in those sedate surroundings was completely different from the old Barrowland, which was it was like a football match, you know, people were bouncing and singing, and it was fantastic, you know. So yeah, good fan of, it just comes from my background, you know, my grandfather being Irish, and my old man considered himself Irish to the degree, despite being born in Scotland, that if Ireland played Scotland at sports, he wanted Ireland to win. Does that change as we go down the generations? I think I would probably want Scotland to win in that scenario, but that's the way things go as we become assimilated, I guess.
Very good. Anybody else seen Christy Moore?
Never have. I'm going to look on the BBC Sounds for it.
Yeah,
Sounds
I'd like
interesting.
Christy Moore Live at the Point is the best album of all time. It's a magnificent album.
Mm-hmm.
I could quote every song word for word. It's absolutely tremendous album. I would love to see him live. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, so would I.
Yeah,
actually. Just saying hello to a few more of the gang who are coming in to see us.
I'll assume you boys in your sweatshirts and your t-shirts that the weather's slightly different where you are in Glasgow. Glasgow's about 10 degrees today. Nice autumn day. The leaves are turning and falling, but on the cool side.
Well, let's turn our attention to events in Scotland as we go through these goals or the moments of the game. Let's start with you. Shall I say Bangkok and Vietnam, or how do I do it? David and Dave? David and Vietnam. Let's start with you. 37 minutes. Scales is handball. Any complaints?
No. I'm kind of puzzled at the point why he put his arm up there. I can't remember who the commentator was at the time, just said, why did he put his hand up? No complaints there.
I mean, his arm is up, but is that not just part of the running motion? I mean, I guess we can't complain about it now, but I mean, is this where they have to have their arms behind their back? Like in handcuffs, that sort of pose?
It's a very unusual position to have your hand, is it not? When these guys know what the rules are. And he's lunging with his right leg forward. Do I have my left arm up and keep it up when I know the ball's going to come in here and it's going to be crossed? You've got to be a bit more careful. I just don't think we've got any. Even if was it fully in, I don't think he intended to do it, but I just don't think we can have any complaints against the rules. That's it.
Yeah, I don't know what you're supposed to do, though. If only we had a manager who could enact body movements in the post-match interview. Would that help, Pat?
Yeah, I think there's no complaints under the current rules. That's a penalty, and I would want it at the other end. Old enough to remember when there had to be deliberate intent for a penalty to be awarded. And I've often thought we should go back to that, because the penalty, I remember Celtic lose Tynecastle, our Asian lads jumped and the ball was behind him and it hit him in the back of the arm. He had no idea where the ball was. And then at the same season at Tynecastle, Hearts player literally played basketball with the ball and no penalty was awarded. It needs just to be firmed up so we know what's a penalty and what's not, and take away this doubt, because it's in that grey area which festers all the conspiracy theories that Scottish football abounds with.
Absolutely. And then a penalty was given, David, in Bangkok. And what happened to the first penalty? It was disallowed, wasn't it? Because Schmeichel was off his line. Did you share Schmeichel's shock that was the case?
Yeah, we were all shocked.
Look at the face on him.
To be honest, when I saw the first time, I thought that his left leg was kind of trailing just as the penalty was taken. But then I think, because when you see this shot, he's actually hit it quite hard. So by the time the ball's left his foot, I think it was a clear retake. It was probably just my green tinted specs that were stopping that. But I wasn't quite as surprised as Schmeichel.
Pat, so you think when you see that photograph, it doesn't matter how green your specs are, that's clearly...
Yeah, the camera never lies. He's off his line, it's a retake. Again, and when you look back at some of the old games, there's keepers doing that every week. Some of them ridiculously far off their line. If the ball goes in the net, the ref usually lets it go. Strangely, I thought it was quite a poor penalty, the first take, because he struck it just where a goalie would want it. So even if he'd stayed on his line, he might still have got it. But no complaints, that's a retake.
And then he took it again. Ronan Hale, who's from very close to where I'm from, actually, in Belfast, just down the road. And there was very little doubt about the second penalty, David, Vietnam.
So he made a really good job of it. But I did think that Schmeichel maybe had doubted himself and didn't move at all on the second take. Clearly off his line, a yard off his line for the first one. So I've no issue with the... Don't know what any shock was. He was off his line. He'd moved. I felt he could have moved somewhat for the second one, but whether or not that would have made a difference, it was a well-taken penalty. So no complaints.
No complaints. Here's a complaint from Mickey Moynihan. Christie's gigs are dry. I don't know if that's a complaint, actually. That's true. They are. I mean, since he gave up the alcohol He doesn't want anyone.
He has, yes. He has a lot of problems with alcohol in his life, but the gig at the Barrowlands had, in true Barrowlands style, had a couple of what I would call pasting tables set up, and they were replete with hundreds of cans of beer, which they were just selling for £1 a time to whoever was there. So it wasn't that dry that night, I can assure you.
I remember people telling me a story about he was playing some gig in Ireland, and he said, you know, you have to close the bar, I'm not playing. And it sort of went to the vote of the mob, and they were all, just keep the bar up, and then off you go.
Yeah.
And
There are stories of his gigs in Glasgow in the early days in the 70s and 80s of people literally helping him to the hotel because he was so drunk. You know, I mean, he really struggled with alcohol at one point in his life. And I think he realised it was going to kill him if he didn't stop. And he did stop, you know, and it made a difference to him, you know.
Some of the comments saying just a stupid mistake by Scales. Definitely a penalty, clear handball. Clement doing the monster mash. Oh, what happened? Did we lose someone there?
We've lost David in Bangkok.
Oh, what's happened? Oh, he's back.
There he is.
There you go. You're moving positions around. There's always a lookalike or two.
Yeah, I tried to refresh. I'm a little bit behind you, I think, in the. I'm a little bit. Yeah.
Did you see the lookalike that was given to Pat?
Can you hear okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. But anyway, let's carry on with the game, shall we? That's probably the easiest thing to do.
All right, okay. Thank you.
All right, David in Bangkok, why don't you take this one then? This is the goal. Oh, is that what happened there? No. Is this the next thing that happened? 76 minutes? This was better. Cal McGregor's strike in 76 minutes, David. Sort of from a corner that was scooped away.
Yeah, it was another shot by McGregor.
Yeah. Carry on. Keep talking, David.
I'll take over if I'm the David then. I'll be David. You've got backup with David. I think actually this one.
Good shot by McGregor, and then well deflected by Johnston.
All right, we're obviously experiencing something of a delay. David, are you sure you don't have YouTube open on your device? Because this length of a delay is usually associated with something like that. So I'm going to throw it over back to David Vietnam to talk us through this. AJ's sublime finish.
So I think brilliant. I mean, he kind of bounced off and it was a good ball in McGregor, but actually I think this goal started a bit earlier with Kyogo's move right in front across the front of goal, creating a huge opportunity to get that ball to McGregor in the first place. So it was Kyogo's movement that actually created that goal for me. And with McGregor putting a bit of power on it, Alistair Johnston there, although he did the assist in the second, but he was there in the right time and claimed it quite rightly, as he should.
Here's a good point from Ian Roy. Pat, I think Casper never moved as well because the ref said he'd yellow card him. Did you notice that?
I think David's right that, excuse me, that Kyogo's movement was key, and I think it was missing when Adamida was playing in the first half. One thing a big centre-half likes is a big centre-forward to wrestle with. You know, they don't like the speedy players that are nipping around them, and Kyogo's movement's crucial to pulling defenders around. The shot was going well wide until it struck Alistair Johnston, but we'll take that any day of the week, you know. But a real relief because we were well into the last 20 minutes at that point. And they were time wasting and doing all the stuff they do, you know. And we do live in a culture where that's praised, you know, because, you know, obviously they're playing a team that has 20, 30, 40 times the resources they do, that any tactics are justified to get a result. Would we use that same logic in Europe? But Ross County will think they were unlucky. They got to within a few minutes of getting a point off of Celtic, a team they seldom beat.
And then we move on to the 88th minute, and a lot was made of this Alistair Johnston pass, but you can see the amount of space he's got there. He's not exactly, it's not an eye of a needle that he has to thread that through, although he did, you know, make a good fist of it. Let's see how the delay is with David in Bangkok when I ask him to talk us through this moment in the game. Oh, jeez.
I'll take it.
Well, actually, for me, what was what was really important was Bernardo's contribution. You know, I think it all started off from, you know, from them defending, them trying to, you know, hold the ball in the corner. Bernardo managed to get the ball off, you know, and then from Bernardo getting the ball into middle. I thought Johnston played a cracking pass. Obviously, as you say, it was, you know, you could have probably got a bus through there, but yeah, straight on to Kuhn playing well, and yeah, I thought it was a really, really good goal. But for me, Bernardo was really integral at the beginning there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't doubt that Kuhn is the player of the year so far this season. I mean, who else could it be?
It's been a remarkable improvement in Kuhn's play, you know, and I think we talk about Brendan Rodgers as an elite manager. There's still a minority, I think, who are still a bit diffident about the way he left the last time, but he clearly does get the best out of players and talk to them about how to actually do their job more efficiently. I think losing our coach, Harry Kuehl, who was a winger himself, I mean, he really was good with the wide men in terms of training them and making them more effective, because sometimes we have quite flashy wingers that don't have the end product. Aidan McGeady springs to mind sometimes, but I think Kuhn has improved dramatically from last year, but of course he was just settling in and having 6 months in a new country, a new setup, new house, everything else.
Yeah, he took it well. You know, cut inside and shoot. People have been trying to get him to do more of, because when he does, it's absolutely lethal.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. That was the game. It was a pretty uncomfortable watch, it's fair to say. David and I watched it. David Vietnam and I watched it as part of the drink along, which is what we sometimes do when the games are on. Just watch it live and talk complete nonsense. Pat wouldn't recommend it. Not if you want to concentrate in the game. But yeah, it was really uncomfortable. The first half especially was dreadful. Then the subs come on, the cavalry come on, and it all ends well. David, you want to talk to us about how, you know, whether Brendan got anything like the response he was looking for after Europe from that game? David Vietnam.
No, I think we were fairly flat-footed. I mean, when the lineup came, obviously there were some changes that were made. Ida instead of Kyogo. Who else did we have? Bailly. Is it Bailly? Valle? I don't know. Valle?
Go for Valle.
Valle. So, and I thought there was just a few players that you were expecting a lot more from in the game. Engels, for me. Hatate was flat-footed, but he's never been quite on his game as much as he always was before. So there was kind of an Ida just didn't seem to do anything for me in that game at all. And and I want him to be that huge, big physical threat up front. And it was kind of obvious when we brought on the subs at the 60th minute plus, the difference that they made, Kyogo made with just his movement. Forrest, again, I was making too many jokes about him, but he's a stalwart for us. But at 33 years old, he comes in with such movement and energy and drive and determination that just was lacking in a lot younger players who you're expecting a great deal more from. And yes, you can expect a bit of a down coming away from a defeat like that. I often wonder, what does Schmeichel deal with? Has he ever had to face a 7-1 defeat in Drubbin in his professional career? I don't know, but must be very difficult for a lot of players to take. Excuse me. Schmeichel's dad obviously commented to him, said, "You be a leader now in this situation." Certainly, I felt he got pass marks because he made some early saves in the game. But overall, the response was pretty poor, I felt, from flat-footed, giving the ball away, not moving the ball at pace, lacked ideas when we had the ball. So I'm putting it down entirely to I wouldn't criticize the manager because the changes that were made, I had no issue with it. I thought that team lineup would get this job done. But so no issues overall with that. But I just think we need to do a wee bit better in terms of the consistency that we need to show here. But we've got the firepower, so I don't know that it was ever really in doubt, although it was getting a bit squeaky at the sort of 70th minute.
Pat, were you
Phil?
surprised that players of our supposed superior quality weren't able to just turn it back on?
Yeah, I guess they're not robots, but they clearly do have far superior players to Ross County, but Ross County are honest pros. They graft hard. They've got a narrow little pitch there. You're going from the best part of 80,000 in the Westphalian to a town which has a population smaller than the district I live in Glasgow. It's about 6,000 people live in Dingwall. So for players like Schmeichel to see Borussia Dortmund away and then see Ross County away, it's an eye-opener about the relative, not standards, but states of Scottish football, if you like, compared to the big guns in Europe. So you're playing against a very honest, hard-working Scottish team who are parking the bus a bit and, went above roughing our players up a bit. I thought Engo's got a couple of naughty challenges, one or two could have been looked at again. But it didn't suit him. It didn't suit him, the narrow pitch, the congested midfield. They were just surrendering the wings and saying, you throw it in all day. We've got half a dozen 6-foot-plus boys that will just nod it away. That seemed to be what was happening. We needed to try and get more through the centre and get some more shots in, because the crosses weren't been very effective. But had that game been at somewhere like Easter Road, where it was a bigger pitch and more open, I think the team might have responded better. I just think it was like, if I had to choose one ground, it would be the most awkward to go to. It would probably be there or somewhere like Rugby Park. It was just a difficult thing to raise yourself again after such a drubbing in midweek, and then coming back to the bread and butter, if you like, of Scottish football after the caviar of the Champions League.
Nicely put. David, in Bangkok, Henrik McLaurson's point here, going to get these games in the season. It's human nature. Main thing is we find a way to win. Are you as sanguine about it as that? Oh, the delay's getting worse. My goodness, this is shocking.
Yeah, I think sorry, I'm only hearing sort of half of what you're saying here. The link's not great. I tried moving rooms, but for me, I think that I think in terms of angles, that's where I'm trying to catch up with the conversation here. For me, he just had a bad game. Maybe his confidence was a bit short. I mean, he's a young guy. I think we have to be realistic, and we can't expect them to be playing every single game to top quality. Every player has a poor game, and I think yesterday was put 10 bob in your meter. I think that yesterday was a good example of that. I think he's obviously a fabulous player, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't at the game yesterday.
Does anybody wonder if we've spent 3 million too much on Ida? That if we got him for 6, we'd be okay.
He's a funny guy, He's a lot of people think he's a big lump, a big useless lump, and then other people see him and they say, "No, he's got so much about his game. Look at the way he turns, the way he holds the ball up. His anticipation, his pace. And he's both of those things. It just depends what day you catch him on. Some days he does look like a big old lump, and some days he looks like an absolute world beater."
I think a lot of the game these days is looked at in numbers and statistics, and I think Brendan Rodgers will look at his assists, look at his goals at the end of the season, and when he scored the win in the cup final last year, we couldn't wait to sign him. There was meltdown on Twitter that we took so long about it, but I think over the course of the season, I think he'll show his worth. He'll have games like that where he just doesn't look as if it's working for him. But on other days, he knows where the back of the net is if you give him the chances. He just wasn't given any ammunition yesterday. I think he'll be an asset to the team going into the future, because there are some games when, and of course there's injuries, but some games when Kyogo's maybe not at it, or you need a different approach and need to go long or whatever, then I think he could be the man that does that. I have confidence he'll be a good Celtic player.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, an asset to the team. Tonight's asset to the team is Lisbon Lion. New face on the show, so we're going to spend a little time having a look at yourself on Twitter. I can share.
Famous for my typos, so hopefully not too many.
Well, tell me about this. You're also a published author. Is this your most recent book?
I've written 2 or 3 Celtic books in my time. Some are compilations of my blogs that I put on my website. Many years ago, I used to write for one of the Celtic accounts, but I decided I'll just do it more because I didn't want the pressure of having a weekly deadline sort of thing. But as I've written over the years, I've more and more wanted to write longer pieces, and you can't really, put 20, 30,000 words onto a blog space. Fans want something they can read in 10 minutes. I decided I would write a book about an Irish family being evicted from their homes in Donegal and ended up in Glasgow around about the time of Celtic's formation, and just bring together some of those threads about community, about church, about football even, but also about the hard lives, the poverty, and the struggles that initial generation had to establish themselves in Glasgow. It's well researched, much as it's a work of fiction. Most of the characters in it, obviously guys like Michael Davitt appear, who's clearly not a fictional character, and Matron Strong at the Royal Infirmary Hospital here in Glasgow. So there are non-fictional aspects to it, and a lot of the incidents I describe in it actually happened, like the mass expulsion of the Irish from Dunfermline in the 19th century, for instance. Not much known about. So the O'Sullivan family have come from Donegal to Glasgow, and they have to make some hard choices about how to survive, and obviously crime is one way to feed your family, but the struggles that particularly the oldest boy in the family has. But I think it's a vehicle for exploring life then and the social conditions then that people had to endure. And just to remind people that most of us are only 2 or 3 or 4 generations away from real poverty and real struggle that our forebears had. And I think it's a good story as well as a vehicle for exploring the social conditions in late 19th century Glasgow.
In the city of Glasgow, as the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal, you might say.
Good old Christy Moore number, that one.
Yeah. So this is available on Amazon, is it?
It's available on Amazon, yeah. And it's, as I say, it must be best part of 400 pages. It's a long book, but I think it's worth it. And I think it's a good story as well, because it's kind of the roots of things as well, And I do take the time to research things properly, There's one episode where the action's taking place in and around the 1892 Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Queen's Park when Celtic won the cup for the first time. So Celtic do get drawn into it, but how could Celtic not? Because that early Irish community in Glasgow in those days, in the 1880s, 1890s, Celtic were a big part of that and giving that community pride and giving them a reason to get up in them on. Their lives were hard, We're talking an era where the working week was 60 hours a week for a lot of people, for those that could find employment, and it was hard, dangerous work for many of them. So I think football, and the greatest thing that ever happened to association football in these islands was the invention of the weekend, or at least a half day on a Saturday, when people were suddenly freed up. So the crowds, from the days of the weekend being invented, if you like, the crowds were doubling and tripling, and football was really becoming the working man's passion, working man's theatre, because it was relatively affordable. And of course, football teams in Scotland, they came from those communities, and therefore they had real strong identification with the communities. So you had, obviously Dundee Harp, who morphed eventually into Dundee United, Hibernians, obviously in Edinburgh, and Celtic. They were, if you like, where the Irish went for recreation, and it was important to people like Brother Walford that they had athletic, and it wasn't just football. Celtic initially were a football and athletic club. The importance of keeping our young people fit and off the streets, and yes, away from the proselytizers who would try and take them away from their faith, as it were. So they had. The clubs had many reasons for coming into being, not obviously Celtic's case, feeding the poor children's dinner tables, which in a sense, and this is talked about in the book as well, led to children staying on at school when compulsory education came into place in Scotland in 1872. Most children left at the end of primary school and went to work because they just simply couldn't afford to be staying at school when their folks wanted them to earn even a pittance was enough to help out, So I think those early teaching orders, the Maris and the Notre Dame Sisters, people like that, they recognised that education was the engine of social mobility that was going to help drag the Irish out of the ghetto, basically.
Very good. Can you answer Pete McGee's question there about the...
Yes, what was his question?
It's on the screen there. Is that the suspension bridge by the Calton?
It is. I took that picture myself with my iPad, yes. Being an amateur writer, I don't have proofreaders or editors and things. I do it all myself, and it is indeed. That bridge features in a key part of the story as well. And the name, The Bridges of Glasgow, for the book, there's a scene in the book where one of the characters, who is head of the Glasgow Ribbon Men, the Ribbon Society, were agrarian societies in Ireland, and historically who protected the Irish Catholic community from Orangeism and landlords and things. They were like a secret society. They came to Glasgow. They came to America as well in the time, and eventually they morphed into the Fenian movement and things. But in one of the scenes, there's a huge battle taking place in Glasgow Green, and the balance could be tipped one way or another, depending if the Ribbon Men come across that bridge and aid the Irish community who are trying to protect their community. But later on, the character, Conlon, who's the leader of the Ribbon Men, he's standing in the Gorbals looking across at the Clyde, at the bridges that go over into the centre of Glasgow. And he said to the other main character, Fergal O'Sullivan, he said, "Look at those bridges," he said. "The other side of those bridges is the commercial, the business, the political heart of Glasgow. Our people won't cross those bridges. Those bridges might as well be fortifications, because our people won't get to work in those banks and those insurance offices, won't get to be in the city chambers." He was talking about the bridges almost as a metaphor for the gap which the Irish had to cross over in order to take a full part in Scottish society. And as people at Film McGillivin have pointed out, the Irish in America, for instance, have reached occupational parity with the average American in 1901. In Scotland, it was 1981. So when you consider things like that, it shows you that the survey and the sort of 10-yearly big survey they do suggested that in Scotland, 12% of the population live in areas of deprivation, and 23% of Scotland's Catholics live in areas of deprivation. So that still lingers a little bit into this modern generation. And I'm not suggesting for a moment all the migrants who came here from Ireland Catholics, because a quarter of them weren't. And they brought with them their cultures and their traditions, which we can see in our streets every July, and some of the songs you might hear at football matches. So it's just interesting to look at where we've been historically and where we're going. As I said about my old man, completely supporting Ireland at sports, even when they played Scotland. But as my generation and my kids are completely supporting Scotland, even when they play Ireland, if I'm watching the rugby or something. So I think there's that mellowing of Irishness as we go down the generations. But I still think it's interesting to explore, where we came from and how we got to where we are.
Well, let's bring it back to the football as we go through some more of your tweets. David's, feel free to jump in if you recall the smell here. The old toilets under the jungle. Breathing apparatus wasn't compulsory, but advisable. David, did you ever entertain your nostrils in that area?
Which David?
Well, either of you.
Yeah, it was absolutely stinking. It was an awful. It stung your eyes actually, and it wasn't just in the urinals. It was actually on the junk steps of the jungle as well. There was rivers of it would come down. And as a wee boy, when I started going there, it was the crush at the very front when we'd score and stuff like that. But
yeah,
and because everybody would take the plastic bags of the tenants' cans in, large bags, and just put them down, and then it would just, and they never bothered with the toilets. They just be where they were.
It's interesting that drinking culture you're talking about. I mean, as wee boys, we would be sat outside the straw house or the General Wolf pub when my dad went in for a few pints with my uncles and things like that, But I found that in the modern stadium, that's obviously frowned upon, but there still are people. I sit near a guy in the North Stand. Every week he brings a half bottle of Buckfast and puts it into a Coca-Cola tub, and he sits there with these straws as if he's having his cola. But, so people find ways if they want a drink at the match. But it used to confuse me. I used to think, why can you not go 90 minutes without drinking?
It's funny, I like a beer. I like a beer when I'm watching on TV, or if I'm at the CSCs, that's fine, you're in the pub. But if I go to a game, I don't like to drink. It's inconvenient. I need to go for a pee, and I miss the game. I want to be there and absorb the whole atmosphere and stuff. So
yeah, I think alcohol as well can loosen people's behaviour, if you like. So you often end up with, in the old days, you had ready-made weapons as well with the bottles and cans, So some hairy scenes when I was a kid going to football. I remember once at Easter Road in that horrible season, 77-78, Celtic had lost 4-1. And there was a field invasion by Celtic fans, and they were lobbing bottles and golf balls and all sorts. And alcohol was a lot to do with that, So maybe by the time they reached 1980 and the riot at the cup final, society as a whole just said, listen, this has to stop. We can't go on like this. It's like the monks in Buckfast Abbey in Devon. They make this high-strength tonic wine, which is full of alcohol, obviously, but it's full of like stuff that keeps you awake as well. So you're drunk, you're wide awake, and you've got a ready-made weapon. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, let's carry on our trip down memory lane. A view I seldom saw, as I was usually up the other end. You're right. The changes in and around Celtic Park are incredible to those of us of a certain vintage.
A few of the old Rangers in there at Celtic Park, coming from the Garngad mostly in my life. I did live in the East End of Glasgow as a wee boy in Govan for a while, the romantically named Wine Alley. But Royston Hill, Garngad as it was known, still is known, was when I was coming. So it was always geographically the west end of the stadium that I would go to, the Celtic end of the jungle as we grew up a wee bit and chanced our arm in there. So I was never really up that end that much. A few times I was in it. Once a League Cup semi-final with Dundee United, a two-legged affair. We'd got a draw at Tannadice, but they hammered us at home 3-0. Paul Sturrock ripped us apart. And the fighting between the Celtic and Dundee United fans in that end was just horrendous on a Wednesday night, a freezing Wednesday night. And I think you tended to be a creature of habit. You even went sometimes to the same spot on the terracing every week because you'd recognise the guys around you. So that was it for me. It was just a case of down along the Gallowgate with a big river of humanity into the stadium and to your usual spot where you sometimes saw the familiar faces around you. You know, didn't venture up that end of the stadium much at all.
Well, let's give David in Bangkok a chance to speak after a 20-second delay as we ask him for his response to this image. Some well-known faces in this tussle between Celtic and Partick Thistle. Dalglish and Hansen would.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me at all.
Yeah,
but no, it was interesting to hear when you were talking about the Wine Alley. I'm from Govan. I'm from Govan too. Yeah.
Good. I stayed in Kellas Street in the Wine Alley, and if you go on my blog site, there's a story called The Wine Alley Boys, which talks about when we were small boys, my two brothers and I, some friends. The Rangers buses used to park in our street when Ibrox was on. If it was a big match, there were hundreds of coaches. When I was a kid, the coaches often had those, you remember those doors at the back? Well, there was no door, that was the point. There was no door, it was just a pole, the old double-deckers. And we would do a commando raid on the buses. We would sneak on the buses when the fans were all in the match. Sometimes there was a snoozing driver sitting in the front, and we would take various items, overcoats, the big shields with our club crest on it would end up in the Clyde and things like that. We were naughty boys when we were small. But it was just a way of life, and it's strange that you'll know if you've been in Govan and brought up there. There's an awful lot of Celtic fans who live near Rangers' stadium, you know, and the Wine Alley was full of Celtic fans.
Who's the keeper? Asks Henrik McLaurson. Did we pick up who the keeper was there?
Oh, it's Alan Ruff.
It's Ruffy. It's got to be Ruffy.
Yeah, who I think played one competitive match for Celtic and a few friendlies.
Better known, of course, now from PLZ Soccer. Does anyone here admit
Alan
to watching
Ruff.
PLZ Soccer? Well, there's David coming in with the answer.
I don't.
Do you
Ruffy
watch-
was a good goalie though, you know, and he
Yeah.
played with some cracking players in his day at Scotland. I think Scotland in the 70s totally underperformed, you know, in terms of tournaments. They got to the odd tournament, but when you think we had Dalglish and Hansen, Souness and so many fabulous footballers, and we often gave the big boys a fight, but fell over the molehill, you know, after we climbed the mountain.
Here's another Irish music reference. In fact, another Christie one, isn't it? Last night, as I lay dreaming.
Yeah,
You used to introduce
Spancel Hill, a
that.
good old tune.
Yeah. Let's keep going with
That's
these. No blame should ever be attached to Sam English, the player involved in that fatal accident with John Thompson. Sam was haunted all his life by those sad events and once said that he was the second unluckiest footballer in the world. That's pretty sad, isn't it?
It is very sad. Sam, some of our fans let themselves down in those days as well. Sam was catcalled everywhere he went, you know, with chants of murderer and things like that by a small minority of fans. Most people realised it was an accident. And I think the newsreel footage you can still see on YouTube proves it was a complete accident. John was brave as a lion. His own brother said that the previous, the season before, he had done a similar dive at a player's feet against Airdrie and had finished up with a broken collarbone and lost a few teeth. He was a very brave player. And I think reading the book about Willie Maley's life, the autopsy on John suggested he also had a thinner than average skull as well, which is more susceptible to what happened to the poor man. But Sam died of motor neuron disease the same week that Celtic beat Dukla Prague to get to the European. That would be getting us to the final.
Very good. Have you frozen there, Pat? Is that David?
Yeah, he's
Are you still with us? Oh,
I'm here. I don't know whether or not. So I think David's still with us.
David's with us, but about 20 seconds delayed.
Right.
Pat is completely frozen.
Pat, I'm enjoying all of the information. I'm looking for his book because I want to buy it. One of my favorite books was the Trinity Leon Uris that wrote. So, and my family originally from Donegal as well. So I will be getting that delivered. But as I see, it's only in hard or softback, so I can't get a digital copy. But I'll buy it, get it over. And Pat, actually, you know who Pat's look-alike? I know everybody's saying about David in Bangkok and Jock Stein, but do you know who Pat looks like? Larry Lamb. Do you know who Larry Lamb is?
Not Larry the Lamb.
Not Larry the Lamb, Larry Lamb. Probably most recently in the comedy show Gavin and Stacey, and he plays Gavin's father, I think. A very handsome man, as is Pat, of course. So I'm sure that's...
Well, so Pat has left us. David is terribly delayed. David in Bangkok, unfortunately. So he's only able to chip in with the odd word here and there. Well, why don't David in Vietnam, why don't you keep talking to us about these images then? Has there ever been a better Scottish club side?
No. That's just wonderful. And look at that shot as well. It's not unbelievably beautiful. And I'm just trying to think of those players, who did I actually see? And I think it was Jimmy Johnston was the only player there that I actually was able to see. Oh, did I see Lennox maybe? Because when we were looking at the picture earlier of Dalglish, in the first match I ever went to see, which was against Hibs, Dalglish was playing. But the problem that I have is I can't actually remember genuinely which year it was now. If it was a year earlier, then Jimmy Johnson played, so I actually did get to see him play. So because I only really remember Kenny Dalglish playing, and who was my hero. So yeah, but look at that! Look at them.
Here's a more recent one. It says, "Morning all. I see the young Bernardo is visiting the Grand Canyon, place I'd love to visit. Any other places in your bucket list to see? You ever been to the Grand Canyon, David?"
I never have. I've never been to the US. I've not. Never. I've kind of maybe now come round to the idea of going over there. Asia is where I've always been interested in, and never the US. But one of these days, you were telling us on the drink along.
Was it? Oh, I can't remember.
You were saying.
Well, the thing about the Grand Canyon is in keeping with the theme of tonight's show, my uncle David, who's like a farmer in Ireland years ago, and he's a pretty simple life, but his brothers took him off to America on a holiday to show him around the States, all the stuff that he'd see on TV occasionally or whatever. And then he was talking about that time that, remember, we went to that place in America and they couldn't work out what he was talking about. And he said, you know, the big hole is what he called it. And they were like, the big hole. Eventually they worked out he was talking about the Grand Canyon. So Pat is back.
Back again. I hope I didn't disappear in mid-sentence there. I'm not sure if it's a Wi-Fi issue or whatever here, but yeah, back again. And I agree with one of your commenters that Spansel Hill is an old Irish song. It wasn't written by Christy Moore, but it was performed by him. Also heard Shane McGowan singing it very well as well.
So we're just continuing to go through your pictures there, Pat. We just discussed this one, more recent one. This is very much kind of what you do. I think this sort of encapsulates your, if I can describe your Twitter handle. You know, you like comparing the past and the present, harking back to other times.
I think there's a tremendous continuity in the support. There was a newspaper report in 1890 about a Celtic fan who was following the team all over the country. That dedication from Celtic fans has been there from the start. And you've seen that picture of Paul McStay, I think, scoring in Ibrox in 1988. And the fans in the modern era, and the passion's just the same, and it's the same for my father. It was the same with my old grandfather, old County Clare man, who he saw McGrory playing players like that. That passion has always been there. It's always been a big part of being a Celtic fan, that the club's very important to people, and their victories are celebrated loudly by everyone concerned, because, it's a real community club. There's very few clubs as embedded in their community as Celtic are in theirs.
Ian Roy must have missed the start of the show. Pat, he's asking if you have a book out.
Yes, I have a few out at the moment. A good book of short stories, a novel, and a couple of Celtic books, which are currently on Amazon. If he looks up PJ Marinan, he'll find them.
Charlie Tully on the right of this picture was quite a player. The game always needs entertainers, and according to my old man, he and Jimmy Johnson were the best of them. So your dad saw Charlie Tully play?
Yeah, my dad was born in 1932. So by the time Tully was coming to Celtic after the collapse of Belfast Celtic and the shameful scenes that led to the club leaving the league, my dad would be in his late teens by that point, and Celtic had been misfiring considerably. I mean, you consider from World War II, even 1938 when they won the title, between then and Jock Stein arriving, I mean, a long period of time. Celtic managed 1 or 2 titles in all that period. It was a real desperate time. They were getting regular thrashings off some of the Scottish teams, particularly in the derbies, and that hurt my dad a lot. So they had a wee brief renaissance in the 50s when Tully was there, when they won the double with the Coronation Cup and, of course, a couple of League Cups with the 7-1 game. Tully just added that magic, and we live in a technicolor world, the post-war world. We still had rationing right into the 1950s. Things were tough. My dad was getting brought up in the Calton area of Glasgow with his old Irish dad, because his mum had died during the war. And it just shows you what the times were like then. My old man and his 2 brothers had been sent to a farm in Aberdeenshire when his mother died, because the old fella was away in the military, the old granddad. And they basically gave my granddad 3 days to get back to Glasgow, find somewhere for his kids, and bury his wife, and then get back to England. So he had no choice but to send them away to this scheme where they put teenage boys from Glasgow out in the fields to dig turnips. So they ran away back to Glasgow. They hitchhiked it from Aberdeen during World War II, from Aberdeen as kids, all the way back to Glasgow. They knocked on a neighbour's door and said, "Can you watch us till my dad gets back?" That woman watched them for 2.5 years. I mean, organised ration books and all that for them. So they became like brothers with this family, the Donnelly family. They took my dad, these 2 brothers in. The woman just took them in and let them stay in her house, which was already overcrowded, literally till the war ended and the old fella got back. So my dad knew hard social circumstances, shall we say. And latterly, when I was a kid, my old granddad lived in a house in Bain Square down at the Barras in the East End of Glasgow, not far from where that St Luke's sort of concert place is now. That was a church in those days. But I remember they had no inside toilet, and vandals had wrecked the outside toilet. And they literally had to go to a local pub. They had to buy a half pint, go to a local pub, buy a half pint. Those social conditions that existed in the 1960s and 1970s, it's only in the last 3-4 decades that they've vanished, thankfully. So he knew tough times, and Celtic was his release, and he would go to watch them home and away. And that would be the team that he would recognise and he enjoyed following. And he just raved about Tully, his corner kick at Falkirk, retaken and scored again. And just how he would entertain them with his antics, and he gave them a bit of light in a difficult time. And of course, when Tully left, Celtic sunk into another one of their, I guess it's underperforming, because it was still one of the best supported teams in the country, although post-war Hibs and Hearts were playing to 30,000, But, late 50s, early 60s, Celtic were just dreadful again until Jock Stein came along. They had a good nucleus of young players by the time Stein arrived. But obviously Bob Kelly was picking the team, and, Mr McGrory was too much of a gentleman. Bertie Auld had said of them, to be a football manager, you don't need to be a gentleman. There's a time when you need to bark at people and give them a kick up the backside if they need it. But Jimmy just never came to training, sat in his office. And Kelly would tell him sometimes, half an hour before the game, I heard one of the players swearing, he's not playing today, get somebody else in, things like that, and he just interfered so much. Kelly loved Celtic, Bob Kelly, but he did interfere. One of the famous stories about him was Celtic were playing Airdrie away, and I'm sure your chaps here have heard this tale. And he saw a young reserve goalkeeper walking along the road near the stadium as the Celtic bus approached Airdrie with his Celtic scarf on. And he said, that's real dedication. Stopped the bus, invited the boy on and told McGrory, drop the goalkeeper and play this boy. He's got the real Celtic spirit. The boy had 2 clangers and Airdrie won 2-0. So I think when Steam came, he kind of dragged the club into the modern era. And then my dad, after those years of famine, was just into the years of feast, 25 trophies in 12 seasons. And it was just like a dream come true when Celtic took over the top club in Scotland and stayed there for a decade.
And that takes us on to where we are now.
Yeah.
We're living through, obviously, a ridiculous golden era at the moment, but we tend to focus on the here and now as fans. We're emotional creatures. So that brings us on to talking about the state of play at the moment. Now, so I want to check in, see where we all are emotionally. So David in Vietnam, you weren't very happy during the drink along yesterday or whenever it was, 2 days ago. No, yesterday. Yesterday. That's how successful the drinking along was.
It was very good, wasn't it?
But well, tell me how you feel about Brendan.
So I think I'm probably more annoyed with Celtic fans who insist in saying he's an elite manager, and that really does bother me because I think there are things that you can define as elite. And I don't think Brendan has. I think he's a very good manager. So let's start there. I think we're very lucky to have him. I'm delighted he's here. I never sort of took much time to accept him back, etc. Don't think it was great the way he left, but come back. And I think he's done wonderfully well after what seemed a very kind of odd return where he would throw players under the bus and he would make these random comments to the press that just seemed to bemuse, and then he never really took control over the Christmas transfer window. But then look what's happened since. So he successfully won us the league, and I think overall, I think for the Scottish league, the last transfer window is probably of the order of A minus, probably something like that. But for Europe, I think it's you'll be lucky, if it's a C, because we simply have not equipped ourselves well enough. Now, aside from the purchasing powers of Celtic relative to others, I do feel that the manager takes a lot of the blame for the way in which he set us up. And I don't feel that I can take much of what he says, a binary sense of everything he says, in terms of I'll just sit in then and we won't attack and that'll be the end of that. And I don't think it's a much more subtle
well, hold on. I'll just jump to Brendan's defense there for a moment, because the question he was asked in that press conference that you're referencing was a very binary question. The question asked whether there should be a huge overhaul. That's the term that was used. And his response was, no, there shouldn't be a huge overhaul. And I think we're kind of, it's not very helpful, this whole conversation of whether we should be all-out attack or all-out defense. I think there's room in his responses for saying that he knows where we went wrong and we should have been tighter. And he talked about players getting out of position. The pressing was rushed. Players were out of position. They pressed at the wrong time. That left lots of spaces, and those spaces were exploited by better players than we normally come up against. So, I'm still on Team Brendan very much. We're going to go to David in Bangkok after a 20-second delay to hear how much he's on Team Brendan and whether he feels, he should be blamed much for that result, or to the extent to which he ought to be blamed for that 7-1 result. David. Oh, come on. It's unbelievable delay. As soon as I start talking, David will launch into his answer. I see somebody in the comments saying David's a great addition. David in Bangkok's a great addition to the conversation, but he has to partake occasionally. No? Go on, David. Just start talking. Jeez. I'm going to sit back until it happens.
Maybe a visual cue is what you need.
I think I'm about 3 minutes behind you. Can you hear me? I went from hearing Pat to his group to Rodgers being an elite manager. For me, Rodgers is not an elite manager. He's good. He's a bit stubborn. I think he's a great coach, but I think for me there's been a lot of comments about, we went from winning every single game, including Man City, including Chelsea. We're averaging 3 goals a game domestically. I think we overestimated how good we were, and we underestimated Dortmund. I think we all went in thinking, that we had a chance. I listened to last Monday's, podcast, and there were a lot of people saying that this was a free hit. And I had mentioned in the chat box that for me it was only a free hit if we actually, avoided a thrashing. And I think the fact that we get hammered, I think it dented our confidence. I think it resulted in the relatively poor performance yesterday when we were lacking confidence. We were wondering, do we have the skills? Are we as good as we think? So for me, I think that there's been a lot said about Rodgers, and is he Rodgers now, or is he Brendan, or is he BR, or is he whatever you want to call him. Yeah, I'm seeing how I'm living on Mars and sitting in my TARDIS here. Apologies for that. But listen, as I say, I think that Rodgers is as good as we're going to get, and I think that he's improved a lot of our players. There's no doubt about that. But I think he just needs to be a bit more pragmatic when it comes to Europe. So I think when it comes to Atalanta and Leipzig, the two next games are very, very important, and I really hope that we do see a change in his style.
Very good. Okay, Pat, over to you. Do you think we're going to see a change in Brendan's style? Or how do you see these next 2 European games going?
I think much like Ange Postecoglou, he has a way of playing and he's just going to stick to that. And Ange is,
you're all frozen.
I think his jacket's on a sugary peg, as they say, down at Spurs at the moment. But I think Brendan has a way of playing, and he said in one of his interviews that we could have packed the back 4 into pack 6, pack 7, and lost 3 or 4-0. He said we'd much rather have a goal, basically. I think there were individual mistakes in that. You can see Daiz Maeda, who's been a stalwart for us this season, just failing to miscontrol the ball on the edge of the box. The Dortmund player moves in and shoots, and the ball's in the net. Individual errors like that, you just can't legislate for them. You can set up a team and then players do stuff like that. I think they were just overall as a team, they were spooked by it all. I think they were like rabbits in the headlights. I think the Dortmund started strongly and scored so soon after Celtic had equalised. And we are not used to that in Scottish football, with teams of that pace and of that clinical nature. We had early in the game, I noticed as they drove forward, as soon as they turned the ball over, we were in trouble, because they had runners moving into the spaces, and they had the guy with the ball just holding it and waiting. And on one occasion, he simply waited with the ball, nobody pressing him, until a guy ran beyond him and he slipped the guy in, and he's right through on goal. And it was so simple. It was as if we weren't there, our defenders. So we need to defend a lot better. Players didn't play well. Manager maybe set them up a bit too adventurously. I'm all for pragmatism. I think you can't go toe to toe. As I've said, you can't have a lightweight fighting a middleweight like that and going toe to toe with them. You need a plan. You need a match day strategy that will try and get you a result. I'm not saying bore them to death and play the Ross County way, the way they played against us. But you do need to be, even for the first 20 minutes, just stay in this game and see where it takes us later in the game. I thought we were wide open, and any team of that caliber, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, even some of the English teams, they would have scored as many because we didn't play well on the night and we were all over the place defensively, and that's a recipe for disaster when you play the big boys.
Yeah, that's what's getting lost in the conversation, isn't it? This whole binary thing of, do we go all out attack or all out defense? I wish the questions had been asked better to Brendan about how he plans to keep it tighter, next time around. But I saw someone mentioning there Aberdeen in the comments, David, in Vietnam. When are we going to start taking their title challenge seriously?
Well, certainly for second place, I don't think we. I mean, I would say that. Shall we take? I'll say it. I think we're going to win the league, and maybe one of a treble we should never ever take lightly. I think it's very difficult, regardless of how far or how much money you've got in front of us, to still win a treble. Any slip up can take that away. Aberdeen are certainly playing very well at the moment. Do I think they're an actual title challenge? I don't think yet. I think there's just too much gulf in what we're doing, and I think we are now. What we're doing now is focusing on Europe, and all of our comments around the team and what we need to do is about being in there. And the new format of the Champions League gives us much more opportunity. I think we still have a chance. I think there's still possible that we can take enough points to allow us to progress. But Aberdeen in the league, a genuine threat? No.
I've watched some of the Aberdeen games, and the weekend with Hearts there, they were behind and came back. They had a full house. The fans are buying into the new manager, and I do think we need competition in our game domestically. I think Aberdeen could push Rangers for second spot this year. I don't think they'll have the depth of squad to keep the challenge up to Celtic, if you like, over the 30 odd games. But I think they'll struggle in the end. But October is a big month for them because they're going to play Celtic and Rangers. They have us on the 19th and they have Rangers at Pittodrie. So we'll see what Aberdeen are made of then. But no, I think that manager's got enough of a bounce to keep them there or thereabouts for second and third place, maybe into the new year. And if they can do that after that, anything's possible in terms of finishing second. But I think Celtic's depth of squad will tell in the end.
Anything's possible. And what was certainly true tonight is that the internet gods were conspiring against us at every turn, but somehow we've made it through in a reasonably coherent hour of Celtic chat. So well done, everyone. Pat, thank you very much for being here, and
thank you for the invite. I appreciate it very much.
Lisbon Lion. Without waiting for a response, we'll say thank you to David in Bangkok. And of course, thank you to David in Vietnam. So if I could ask everyone to mute their microphones just before I play the outro. And we'll say goodbye to everyone who's in the chat. Thank you very much. As always, the people in the chat make the show. Lots of very good points. Thank you kindly. And until the next time, well, nothing left to say, I guess, but hail, hail.